Hi guys, welcome to our Unity AI Essentials course where we're going to be building a 2D fruit cutting game. So in this tutorial, we're going to be building a fruit cutting game in Unity entirely from scratch while heavily leveraging and showcasing Unity's AI assistant to generate the majority of our gameplay systems and scripts. So we're going to be going through the complete development process, including setting up a background and scaling it, spawning fruits dynamically, actual slicing mechanics and slicing 2D meshes, particle effects when that happens, as well as maybe sound effects, UI scoring systems, and more. It all depends on how long it takes and how efficient Unity's AI assistant actually is. So throughout this course, you'll see the exact prompts used with the AI tool, and then what kind of results to expect, where it succeeds, and where manual adjustments inside the editor are still necessary and required. The focus of this course is not about just building the game itself, but exploring how far Unity's AI tooling can take a real project with minimal handwritten code and limited traditional programming. So if you want to learn how to actually do game programming and build it yourself, this isn't exactly the course for you. This is going to showcase how to leverage Unity AI and try to just take a step back and have it do a lot of the work for you. But either way, with that in mind, we can go ahead and start setting up our project and Unity AI. So we're just inside of our Unity hub here, and we're going to go ahead and select a universal 2D project because our fruit cutting game is going to be two-dimensional. And then of course, make sure you have the proper save location, make sure you save it where you normally do, and then we're going to go ahead and give this a name. So I'm just going to call it Fruit Cutter Record. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and just select Create Project, and then do some initial setup of Unity AI. So here we are inside of our project folder, and I just went ahead inside of our assets, made 4 additional folders that we're going to be using throughout this course. So we have our sprites for our 2D assets or our images, then we have our prefabs folder for our reusable game objects, then we have our scripts folder, and then we have our audio if we get to the step of playing sound when we're cutting fruit here and there. So either way, we might have to add more folders, but I just created those ahead of time, and now we need to figure out how do we actually set up Unity AI inside of our project. So at the top here, inside of Unity 6.5, which is the version we're using here, there's a little drop down here that says AI. So again, even if you've accepted this term before and read through it, each time you start a new project, it makes you agree and reinstall Unity AI. So you're going to go ahead, select the drop down, install the necessary packages, and then you need to decide, well, what version of Unity AI do you actually want to use? So once the actual library is installed or the package, we can go ahead and select the drop down again, and then go ahead and select Open Assistant. So again, this usually takes a couple seconds, but then we have another window that we can just drag into our project. I overall just prefer having it on the right side here in the same tab as our hierarchy, but you can place it wherever you want. So as you can see here, it already tells me that if I want to use the actual Unity version of the AI assistant, I have no credits remaining. So it means you actually have to go ahead and go into Unity and then upload your payment information in order to get usable credits that you can use the built-in Unity model. But in my experience, I feel like the Unity built-in version is not near as good as the Claude Code or the Codex options that are already available. So in this case, if you want to use an alternative option, which we will be doing throughout this course, we will go ahead and select those options. So as you can see here, I can go ahead and actually choose Codex or Claude Code because I had it pre-configured. But if you don't have it pre-configured or you've never done it before, you're going to go ahead and select the Add Agent option right here. And then from this option, it's going to say, well, please enter an API key, and you can go ahead and select which agent you want to use. So in this case, I think we're going to stick with Codex. And then from here, you're going to go ahead and jump into the ChatGPT or the OpenAI development portal, and then you're going to go ahead and paste your API key inside of here. And then make sure you also enable the agent. Once you do that, it should automatically work, assuming that it is a valid API key. So again, the same thing applies to Claude Code. But in this case, we're going to stick to Codex. You can also try Gemini and Cursor. I haven't worked with those myself, but Codex seems to be the one that worked best for me. So again, just make sure you have the API key inserted, and then you can go ahead and close out of this window. And then of course, we can go ahead and test if it's actually working and everything is synced up properly. So we can go ahead and ask, are you working right now? And then we'll go ahead and give it a second. And since it's already reasoning, you can see that everything is working as intended. And this will be essentially the foundation of the rest of our course. We're going to be using this chatbot in order to build an entire game for us. So the idea is that we're going to have very structured prompts that are small tasks, and then eventually it'll come together to make a complete game. So instead of saying, please make us a fruit game or a fruit cutting game, we're going to go ahead and say, well, first, let's build some assets. From there, we're going to learn how to dynamically spawn the assets. Then we need to detect collision with our mouse so we can actually cut the fruit. Then we need to decide, how do we cut the fruit? Do we cut it in half? Do we have pre-cut images that we insert? So we're more or less designing the game ourselves. We're just giving it small tasks to do to bring the vision together, like we're almost like a manager for it. But either way, this is how we're going to be tackling the course inside of this AI assistant. And if it needs manual changes inside of the editor or manual code edits, we will of course be using touch-ups as well, because it's not going to be perfect. It's in beta, and of course it's going to need lots of refinement, and it'll get better over the months and over the years. But with that in mind, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. The project is now initialized, and in the next video we can actually get started on our game and figure out, well, what's the first step and how do we accomplish that with prompts only. So I'll see you then when we do that. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to our Unity AI Essentials course. And now that we have our chatbot actually set up, we're going to take our first step in creating our game. So the first step in creating our game, in my opinion, should be just dealing with our 2D assets that we're going to be using. That should be our background, as well as the fruit that are going to go ahead and be cut. So instead of using Unity AI Assistant, we're actually going to go ahead and either create our own assets using external tools, or you can use an external LLM like ChatGPT, for example, to just create some easy pixel art for you. So again, we could spend a lot of time creating our own pixel art, but I myself am not an artist, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask an LLM to make some very basic pixel art for us, or you can find some free stuff online. Either way, the stuff that we are going to be using is going to be included with the source code, so you can go ahead and just copy it. It'll be paired with this video. So if we go ahead and jump into our sprites folder, I went ahead and already generated some things and just uploaded them. So in this case, we have an actual background, which will be a board, and then we also have some assets like an orange, a pineapple, a strawberry, and a watermelon, which of course will be the assets that we are cutting. So before we actually use them inside our game, we do have to do some basic customization. So first, we're going to make sure this texture type is a sprite with 2D and UI, and then for the sprite mode, we're going to go ahead and make it single. We're also going to go ahead and leave the mesh type as tight, but we may need to change that later if it causes any problems with respect to our cutting mechanics. So either way, we're going to go ahead and make sure that the sprite mode is single for all of them. Make sure we click save, and then we'll just go ahead and do that for all of them. All right, make sure the texture type is also 2D and UI for every single one. And now what we're going to do is go ahead and drag these assets into our hierarchy here. And the reason for that is just because the fruit right now are all pretty large in size, and we want to adjust how they're going to spawn inside of our game dynamically. So in order to do this, we're just going to turn them into prefabs that can be reused later. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our screen. So in this case, we're just going to go ahead and leave the watermelon as is for now. And then we can go ahead and take a look at the pineapple and see how we're actually feeling about it. So in this case, I'm just thinking how big or small we should probably make them. But I think for the watermelon, we'll just scale everything down to 0.5. And then for the pineapple, we will make it about slightly smaller than that. Sorry, I have to unlock everything. We'll make everything 0.75 its current size, because I think a pineapple and a small watermelon are comparable in size. Maybe we'll make the watermelon slightly bigger. And then for something like an orange, we'll make it smaller than the pineapple even, so make it 0.4, for example, or 0.45. And then we also have a strawberry, which of course will be our smallest. And we'll go ahead and make it 0.15. Maybe that's a little bit too hard. We'll make it 0.12 for the time being. And these are the assets that we're going to be using, and they're going to be falling into our game dynamically. Once we get these assets, we make sure all the settings are appropriate for what we want right now. We can go ahead and just drag those into our prefab folder. One second, I gotta drag from the hierarchy, sorry. We're just gonna drag in all of these sprites. And then in this case, we now have our prefab elements. So we can go ahead and delete all these guys. And then if we drag them back into our game, you can see that they just retain their size and they retain the previous settings that were created. So I'm sure we'll have to come back and change like their Z index or their order in layer. But if you want to do that, you just drag it into the world, or you don't even have to drag it into your world. You can just go down inside of here and then change whatever settings you need. And then it'll always apply to the dynamically spawned objects. So with that in mind, I think that's going to more or less do it for this short video. We just wanted to start with our basic assets and then just set up some prefabs that are easy to reuse and configure down the road. So this is probably the most we're going to have to do manually inside of Unity Engine for any given task. We'll just have to mess with some of the project settings and then hook up the scripts, assuming that the AI assistant does a good job with the actual C# and logic portion. So yeah, I think in the next video, we'll finally start using the AI assistant to actually build us something. And we're going to be focusing on this time, instead of the fruits, we're going to be focusing on the background. So we're just going to make sure that when we drag it into the scene, and hit the play button, it's always going to fill our entire screen, regardless of the aspect ratio, the resolution, or just the general size after adjusting it manually. So again, we're going to use a script in order to make sure that there's never any white space behind us, and then the game will just look, better made, assuming that those gaps don't exist. So I'll see you guys in the next video when we go ahead and tackle that. Thank you.